Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna, and with me this episode, our executive art director, Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special projects editor, Matt Kenny.
Howdy, everyone.
And our web producer, Ben Strano, over there in the corner. And helping behind the scenes, as always, is Jeff Rose.
Hold on a sec, because every time his name is Jeff Rose.
Yes.
You can just say Jeff Rose. But every time you say it, it's like you're really proud of the fact you're saying Rose instead of Ruse.
Jeff Rose.
I am.
So, just saying. Anyway.
I said it right this time.
Don't pronounce it as it appears on the masthead. Anyway, before we get started with the questions, I have to take care of some business. This podcast is brought to you by Titebond. Even if you're not a professional woodworker, you want to use the glue the pros use. And 3 out of 4 pro woodworkers trust Titebond as their choice. For building wood furniture or cabinets, to making picture frames or birdhouses, or just general repairs around the house, Titebond has the widest choice of glues to help with whatever project you want to tackle. Titebond is the right glue for your next project. Learn more at titebond.com or see them on Facebook. Let's rock on to some questions right away. Let's see, what do we have here? This one, the first one comes from Dan. And Dan says, I'm about to put a finish on a large cherry tabletop. I've been reading several articles from Fine Woodworking about the best finish on cherry to avoid blotching. One article uses a shellac wash coat before applying a top coat. Another article suggests using Watco Danish oil first and then applying shellac. Can you talk about the methods for finishing cherry that you find most successful?
It's a really good question, and it's not a question with an easy answer. And I've actually used both of those techniques. The thing is that I figured cherry, if it isn't surface prepped well, those sort of areas of changing grain, if there's any really small tear out to make the grain fuzzy at all, if you put an oil finish on that, it really absorbs in there, and it just stays dark no matter, which way you look at the board. That's what I consider blotching. However, if you surface prep cherry really, really well, all that changing grain direction in cherry, you put an oil finish on that and it really pops, and the light areas sort of, as you change your view of the piece, or the light changes, the light areas go dark, the dark areas go light. That's luster. So luster and blotching are sort of like the evil twins of each other. So if you have some really figured cherry and your surface prep isn't something that you're really confident with, a wash coat of shellac is going to limit the absorption of the oil or whatever finish you put on after the fact. You're basically sort of sealing it. So you're going to avoid any blotching by doing that. So in that case, shellac is a really good thing to pre-finish cherry with. On the other hand, putting a wash coat of shellac on cherry also limits that luster if you do happen to do a really good surface prep on it. So it's one of those things where you got some really nice figured cherry, you spend a lot of time on surface prep, go with an oil finish because it's really going to pop it. On the other hand, anything less than ideal, you're going to get blotching. Hit it with shellac first. So bottom line, do a sample board on a piece of stock, an offcut of what you're working with. Prep it the way you normally prep it and try it. Do half shellac and then oil, and the other half just put oil on the bare wood. You're going to find out pretty quick which one you like better.
Mm-hmm. Any words to add, Matt?
Oh, am I on the podcast today? In terms of surface prep for cherry, sharpen your plane blade before you plane it to clean it up. Then I think after I do that, I always sand it as well.
Yep.
So I normally, after that, you could start probably at 400 grit if your plane blade is truly sharp and there are no tracks in it. You could do 400, and if it's figured, you could even go to 600.
I'd definitely go 800, 1200. 1,300. No, it's just because
I get out my Waterstones and
don't forget the craft paper.
I mean, the way a lot of sandpapers are graded, if they're graded with the FIPA system, meaning they have a P in front of it, like P 400 grit sandpaper is a lot coarser than just regular 400 grit sandpaper. So even P 800 grit is coarser than regular 600 grit sandpaper. So that's when I say when you go up and up, it has to do with the fact that more often than not, you're using sandpaper which is actually graded more coarsely than maybe the paper you're used to using in the past.
Maybe. I don't know. If I sand with, like, if you go to Home Depot, they sell that 3M stuff that's purple now.
Yeah.
And like the 400 grit with that stuff is really smooth. And this, I think you can get 600 with that. It's really good. And I don't have splotching with cherry after using that stuff. I have luster. So you said luster?
Luster.
Splotching's the evil twin of luster. Mike's gonna start writing novellas for Univision.
Yeah. I like to go at
graphic
least
novel.
at least P800 on anything with a fairly close grain and luster, like definitely figured cherry, definitely figured maple.
But with P800, you're wet sanding, right? Because P800, that's only going to come in a wet, dry.
Yeah, but I'm still
dry sanding it,
dry sanding.
and you just cleaning it out a lot, or you just going through a lot of the paper.
No, you just sand it.
Because the clogs pretty fast.
No, it doesn't.
Fight.
It doesn't tend. No, I mean it's just what you're doing with that final grit.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. And then when I do put a wash coat on or the first coat of anything, then I will typically wet sand with that same
with
grit
220.
I left off it. Right. The only problem I've had with the wet dry sandpapers, we talked about this in the past, is when I'm working with ash, which is a really open grain, really light wood. I found that the little grit from the sandpaper, that black grit gets in the grain and kind of turns it black. So that's the only time I'm really, really careful. That's why I like the purple stuff for that, definitely.
Purple stuff. I like it. All right, let's move on to question number 2. This one comes from Randy. And Randy says, the end-vise on my bench has an outside jaw made of a thick piece of maple about 3 inches wide. The 1.5-inch thick bench top serves as the back jaw. Would installing a jaw on the bench side improve clamping capability? What thickness should it be? Do you recommend lining both jaws to prevent marring of the workpiece, like leather or a thin piece of softer wood?
So let me wrap my... So first of all, it's not an end-vise. He's talking about a face vise.
No, it's
No,
an
it
end-vise.
is an end-vise. I meant to bring the photo in for you to look at, but
we looked
there's
at
a
the picture.
photo.
You didn't see it.
We'll post it on. We'll post it on the site what he's talking about. But it is an end-vise.
So it's an end-vise, and the end-vise jaw is 3 inches tall.
Yeah, it's wider than the bench top is thick.
And so when it goes against the bench top, it's not... So it doesn't have like a cast iron back jaw. It just is going against this 1.5-inch thick piece of wood.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to put a jaw on that.
Yep.
So this is actually really a funky problem because I initially thought it was a face vise
That's
that he
what
was
I thought.
talking about, which is really easy. Slap an apron on there.
Right.
Yeah.
The same thing is true. You
you
just
can-
basically slapping what is in effect an apron on the end, but you do have cross grain movement, so I'd probably bolt that in place.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a tail vise. It's just an end vise.
It's an
Right.
end-vise. Right.
What kind of, is it cast iron?
Cast iron vise hardware, so without the jaws, where you have to screw on the, you drill holes and you sort of thread it through an outside
So it's
jaw.
face vise hardware on the end grain, on the end.
Right.
Yeah, so you can bolt an apron on.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
As far as leather and stuff, I mean, chances are if this is sort of like a big, long end vise, and there's like a dog hole on each end of it, the thing looks like about 30 inches long.
The vices?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like that used to come on like the acorn bench.
Yeah.
Remember the acorn
Yeah.
bench? Yeah.
So you're probably using, a lot of times you're using that in conjunction with the dogs to hold down like a big tabletop for planing or something
Right.
like that. In that case, you're probably not using the jaws very often. Even if you were, I don't line the jaws of my vices with leather at all, ever. I keep a scrap of leather around. I picked this up from Garrett Hack, and you just sort of drop that down between the jaws if you're trying to clamp something that's already been finished, like you're attaching hinges to a door that's already been finished. Other than that, wood to wood, I don't have a problem with.
No.
Yeah. I don't either.
Keep some satin around.
Keep some what?
Yeah. It's a funky setup, that vise. The big, wide end vise. Those are funky. I've seen those before.
Yeah. Yeah. I was kind of like, wow, that's what he was talking about. Because I was thinking with Matt that it was a face vise. But
Well, a lot of people take the Veritas twin screw hardware and put it on the end of their bench and have a big old long jaw there.
Yeah. Well, that's different. I mean, I mean, as we all believe, the twin screw vise is a superior vise to that face vise style where you have a single screw with 2 guide posts. And, that's because there's so much racking. And when you try to spread it over 30 inches or whatever, it just becomes even more problematic.
Yeah. I mean, if you're clamping, say, a piece of stock along the entire face, that's fine.
Yeah.
And if it's a big bench top and you're using both bench dogs, that's fine. But if you're using just, say, one bench dog with a board along the front edge of your bench, then, that's when you're really going to kind of tweak things out a little bit.
So the real answer is you need a new bench with a different vise.
Or he can continue the way he wants to.
It's all good,
enjoy
Randy.
it.
Just throw a wide jaw on there. You're in good shape.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on to a segment. It is time for our all-time favorite tool of all time for this week.
All right.
I'm going to let Matt roll this one out.
Oh, that's risky because I'm going to pull a Pekovic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good, because I've got one for you.
So I'm actually I got to answer this first in the negative. What's my least favorite tool of all time this week? Because I have one.
Oh, get ready to edit this, baby.
But that's going to lead to my all-time favorite tool of all time this week. For now. So my least favorite tool of all time this week is this is a flush trim bit that I have. I'm not going to say the brand, although maybe I should, but it's probably, I don't know. I'm not going to say the brand. It is the kind, it's a really nice style of flush trim bit where it has a bearing on top of the cutters and a bearing beneath the cutters so that you can, if you're doing template work at the bench, at the router table, you can you never have to take the part out of the template. You just flip-flop it up, over and raise the bit or lower the bit to get to the different bearing.
So when you're routing curves, you're never routing into the grain.
Right. You can, and you don't have to take the part out and flip it around in the template. You just turn the template over and use the other bearing.
Right.
Yeah. So
my Destaco clamps always run into the tabletop when I do that.
Well, that's, you don't have to use the Destaco clamps. And it has actually a shear cut. The cutters are angled slightly.
Okay.
So I really like this bit, but it has a huge problem in that the bearing is slightly larger in diameter than the frickin' cutters.
Yes.
So it's not really a flush trim bit. It's an almost flush trim bit.
Yes.
Close to flush.
It's close
trim.
to
It's a little proud.
It's the CTF.
Yeah. So it's infuriating to use this bit. And
Is it red?
no, it's not.
Okay.
Because you had the same problem with the red one?
Yes.
Yeah, this one's blue. So we've just outed two.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
God help Alex.
well, hey, maybe they can take it as a.
It's not the quality,
They
it's
can
the
fix
style of cutter.
Yeah, it is.
And it's not the style you prefer.
Well, but I love the two bearings,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
because I had a bunch of edge banding to flush down, and I mean a bunch, and I started to do it with hand planes, and I was like, man, forget this. There's a technique that I'm going to save, which is awesome to use, but it would not work with my favorite tool of all time this week, which I appreciate even more now, which is a white side ultimate trim bit. It's the kind that they're about $150, and it it almost looks like a segmented cutter, not segment cutter head, but it has
Like a spiral.
it has bits going for upcut, downcut, and it's
Kind of the wiki-whack knives things on
yeah,
there. Yeah.
it's super awesome. You can use it to go against a grain sometimes.
A lot of grain,
Yeah.
a lot of time. Yeah.
Yeah, be careful still, but you can do that, and it's just awesome. It leaves such a nice surface, and the bit bearing is the same diameter as the cutter head,
Coincidentally.
which makes it really awesome as a flush trim bit. So that is my favorite all time, and that's an expensive bit, I know, but if you do a lot of pattern work, it's well worth the price.
Do you have the bit top and bottom?
I don't. I have the one
I mean,
where
the bearing top and bottom.
when it's in the router table, the bearing's on the bottom.
Yeah.
I would like to get the one with top and bottom. If only I knew where one was.
It's funny because I have the one top and bottom, but I wish it was just the bearing on the bottom because I think the cutter's only like 1 1/8".
Yeah.
Which is a lot, but then again, it's like never quite enough. Like if you're doing like a full-on start with 1/4 stock and you're routing a leg template, and it's like, oh, because if you didn't have the bearing on the top, you just do it a little way, one
And then
pass,
raise
and
it.
you raise it up. You're registering off the part you already routed to finish it off.
Right.
You can take the top bearing off, but the cutter geometry at the top, it's like really flat. It's not really designed to do sort of a non-through cut kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, you just have more than one.
exactly.
They're only $150 each.
Yes. I'll trade you.
There's the woodworking
Well, we
budget.
could just share.
Mine actually costs more than yours, so
Does
I'll
it?
just trade you straight up.
Oh no! But it is the kind of thing where we talked the last time we did a favorite tool, and I said it was my Festool Domino, right?
Yeah.
There are some tools that, granted, are in the parlance of the average man, and we are average individuals when it comes to wealth, that they are expensive.
I think we're below average.
Well, I didn't want people to know how bad it was here. We get paid in hot dogs and cheese. We don't even get cash. This is not even corn dogs. They don't even get us the bread.
They're good dogs though.
That there are some things that are simply worth spending the money on.
Yeah.
And when it comes to tools, other places you can cut corners, and save money, but sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and, go for it.
Buy the tool that's not going to make your life miserable.
Oh man, let me tell you, I was so angry because I had forgotten that bit was like that, and I started doing all these edge bandings, and I was like, wait a minute, they're not flush. I was like, curse ye. Yeah.
You have to hire yourself an apprentice.
Oh my goodness.
I was teaching a class where we're doing cabinet with a door, and I had the routing jigs for the hinges, and I had like 3 or 4 set up, and a student came back and said, this hinge is not even fitting in this mortise, and it's like way too small. It's like, what were you doing? Because it's sort of automatic. And sure enough, the bit I bought for that setup, it was offset by about 1/16 of an inch.
Yeah.
The bearing was bigger, and it created a mortise, which was like way too small.
It is a surprisingly common shortcoming of flush trim bits.
I mean, obviously it's designed that way. So where it's designed, like you said, like if you're trimming whatever, laminate or something, and leave it hanging over just a little bit, and then you finish it off, maybe you're using one of those angled bits afterwards, to put a 45-degree chamfer. So there's some reason, because they're certainly not designing bits for, woodworkers making fine furniture. That's a really small market. So there's some logic to it that is sort of escaping us. Yes.
Well, all right. So I'm going to ask, because I know a guy who would know the answer to that question. So I'm gonna email that guy today.
All right.
I emailed him yesterday about something different. I'm gonna email him today about that question.
Rock on. All right, Mike, you want to hit us up?
Yeah, I had 2, and I was trying to figure out which one would annoy Matt the most, and I believe it's this one, which is a box of shims.
Yes. Yes. I'm loving it.
A while back, I don't do a lot of built-in installs. I did one for a friend. It's a sort of a big unit that went in the bedroom. There were like 15 drawers. They were all on the metal drawer slides, which I don't use very often. But in terms of putting the slides in, there might be a better way to do this, but I found that any slight variance between the width of the drawer box and the width of the case and the slide would kind of bind. So I made up a bunch of shims in like 3 different thicknesses, from maybe like a 32nd up to maybe, almost 1/8 of an inch. And so I made a whole bunch, and I used those to shim out the drawer slides as needed to get a really good fit. So then basically I had a box of a lot of these leftovers. And this was probably, 3 or 4 years ago. And I use these things all the time, whether it's for centering doors and openings to mark hinges, for setting the gaps between backboards, for installing backboards, even for if I'm looking for a slightly angled cut on the crosscut sled, I can pull out a little shim, stick it in there if I'm fitting a door to an opening that isn't square. So use these things all the time. I was just using them the other day and said, wow, this is really cool. And it's kind of an accident, but I'm kind of running out of them because they look really exactly like a scrap of wood. If they're just left on your workbench, you tend to throw them out. So I'm running a little bit thin. And the only thing I'm going to do when I make more is when I rip the long strips at various thicknesses, I'm just going to take a colored marker and run a stripe down each strip. So then when I cut them into their short little lengths, like 1.5 inch lengths, they're all going to be color-coded.
I also have a box of shims, so stick it. That's not getting to me. I made a whole bunch when I was making my kitchen cabinet doors, and I used them they were all made to, as the gap left by the hinge.
Yeah.
And then
right.
I would just went around and put them in the door as I fit each door to try to get that gap as nice as possible.
Yeah, very cool.
What I will say though,
Okay.
Here we go.
is that so Mike recently on Instagram posted a picture of him using the shims and the little shim boxes down there, which of course is some kind of dovetailed little box. And
With a sliding top. Yeah.
Mike spoke about these shims and the change they had on his life as if he had met the Buddha. And it was this unbelievable, long thing where it was just changing his life. It was amazing.
The Buddha takes many forms.
Exactly.
He does. But you know what you do when you meet the Buddha on the road?
Pass on the left.
Kill the Buddha.
Buy him a drink.
What?
Yes. If you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha.
Huh.
Yes.
Is that like finding Pokemon?
If you find a Pokemon, kill the Pokemon. That's a different way to play a Pokemon.
It's the New York way.
Now, this has some philosophic bent to it. You're not actually disparaging a certain world philosophy here,
That's an actual Buddhist saying.
is it?
Yeah. If you meet the
Kill the
Buddha,
Buddha.
kill the Buddha.
All right.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not making that up at all.
I was hoping you weren't. Okay. All right.
There's the perfect episode title right there, Ben.
yeah.
Kill the Buddha.
Yeah.
Asa was our special guest today.
Well, my all-time favorite tool of all time for this week is my medium shoulder plane by Veritas. Building this little cabinet that I'm doing. This tool is so awesome for dialing in the fit of a tongue and groove joint. I have these shelves and partitions in there that I assemble the cabinet after I've routed all the grooves, and then I'm just cutting the joinery to fit. And it's just so nice to. I used to struggle with my table saw, trying to get that fit perfectly right off the saw, and it's so nice to get it close and then just kind of ease up on the fit. Put it in, test it out. See where it's binding. Come back with the plane, and it cuts so well on end grain. It's just so cool. I love seeing curly shavings come off a shoulder plane, and I'm surprised. I actually sharpen that blade freehand, and I'm always amazed at how sharp I can get the tool. I just haven't figured out how to hold it in my sharpening jig yet.
Yeah, that's a great tool. I have that one as well. And I have actually found I usually just sharpen it freehand because the bevel is so wide that it's fairly easy to keep that flat. And
Right.
if you just kind of get it set, lock your
Move your
elbows against
body.
your body, and then just rock back. And then I only go back.
Yep.
And I found that blade comes so flat on the back that it polishes to a mirror like instantly.
Yeah.
And that it's so flat on the bevel that it really polishes up very quickly.
Phil Lowe taught me that method when I took a hand tool class with him so many years ago. The holding with your body and just kind of moving it. It's really effective for blades like that.
Do you have the Veritas Mark II with the little pinchy jaw attachment for chisels?
I do. I haven't used it.
I think that
for my
one
shoulder
will work.
plane. Yeah,
That does.
I'll try it.
Yeah, I've used it as well for that
Also,
one.
the Lee Nielsen, you can get like the long jaw set. That's for doing really short things. That actually is awesome for shoulder planes and even spoke-shaped blades, which again are really short.
I may just continue to go freehand because I seem to be successful with it instead of trying to figure
So now,
something out.
is that your
but
only shoulder plane?
It is, and
So-
I'd like to get a bigger one.
I was going to ask. You went with the medium.
Yeah. It was, it's funny. It was one of my first purchases when I started really discovering and using hand tools in my work. And I wish I'd read Chris Gochner's article on shoulder planes before I bought it, because his argument for using or buying a bigger shoulder plane is really sound as making it your first purchase, because it will handle wider surfaces. But I like the medium. It just fits my hand. It's easy to navigate. It's just a comfortable tool as well.
Do you like that little flippy knob on the back? Do you use that?
I do use it. Yeah. Little flippy knob.
I'll use it.
So do you not like the flippy knob?
I don't use it, so whenever I do use one, I find it strange.
Gets in the way.
And I always like to grip the shoulder plane right over the blade.
Okay.
And I find if I sort of put that flippy knob in the crook of my thumb, it puts my hand too far back.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost turns it into like a two-handed plane or something.
Right.
I will say, just to go back to Mike's Instagram
no.
feed, that I am not immune to waxing existential about the philosophical importance of rather mundane things on my Instagram account.
Okay.
All right.
So I was criticizing Mike. I was making fun of Mike for doing that. So I'll say I do it too.
Oh.
All right. True confessions. All right, let's go back to some questions. The next one comes from Peter, and Peter says, I'm a senior in college, and over this past summer, I took woodworking back up and have been enjoying it immensely. After taking a class with Mike Peckridge at the end of the summer, I feel like I could do this for the rest of my life. My issue is that I feel like I would be throwing away my degree. My question is, what was each of your own paths to professional woodworking, and what would you recommend me to do to further my goals of working in the industry?
Well, first, your parents are very disappointed in you.
Marry rich.
And you are throwing away your education. You're a disappointment to us all.
Get back to school, Peter.
You know, I have to say, Peter, don't feel bad about wasting your degree. That's what I'm doing. I mean, for Pete's sake, I have a PhD in philosophy. You know, I was a college professor, and I completely turned my back on that. Except when I occasionally use vocabulary that these fellas don't understand.
Yeah, like podium. Well,
Like podium.
No.
It was rostrum.
Rostrum.
But you know, here's what because actually Ace asked me this not too long after I started working here. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it. He said, but essentially, you know, do you regret having gone through school and gotten a PhD in philosophy and all that, and to end up working here? And my thought has always been, no, I don't regret anything that I've done in the past, because all the decisions I've made in the past were what made it possible for me to be here now.
Yeah.
You know, so because I don't have any journalism experience,
What?
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
But having been studied philosophy taught me to think critically. It taught me to write clearly, and also it gave me the ability to analyze things and break them down logically, which is a lot of what I do as an editor. And then being a professor taught me how to edit other people in a way. So all this stuff that I did in the past led me to where I am. So don't feel like you're wasting it, as long as whatever he's I have no idea what he's majoring in. You know, that as long as it's something that you can put to use in woodworking.
Yeah.
You know, then it's not really wasting it. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, college is it's part of it is the experience of going away and being
Getting
somewhat
drunk.
independent. No. Being independent, kind of learning, you know, about life experiences, and hopefully, you know, getting a degree that gets you a job. I mean, I'm lucky. I was a journalism major, and I was into woodworking and building when I was young, and I'm lucky that I landed it working in the industry, you know, in a roundabout way. I'm not a professional woodworker, but I get to read about and I get to visit, you know, all these fabulous woodworkers. So, you know, this is like a clutch job, and there are different ways that you can maintain an interest or an active woodworking life and not necessarily have it be a career path.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, my background really similar to Matt's as well. It was a really long and winding path to get to exactly sort of the job that I wanted. And had I set that out as a goal to begin with, I probably wouldn't be here. So just, you know, work hard, follow your passions, and keep moving forward. In terms of what to do now, if you think you have the bug and you're not really quite sure what to do, you know, I'd say keep going. You know, if you're still in school, if you have the means to spend another year or a couple of years in the classroom, why don't you make that in a kind of a woodworking classroom, whether it's a 2-year program at North Bennett or College of the Redwoods or a 9-month program at Peter Korn. Really get a sense to see where your passions lead you in woodworking. And you're going to have a lot of time to sort of figure out the possibilities that are open to you in terms of following that career.
Right, right. You know, another option is an apprenticeship. Tim Coleman has a young guy who is doing some work for him. He comes into the shop pretty regularly and is learning some great stuff from Tim, not only about technique, but also about, you know, being a pro, making a living and getting a good glimpse as to, you know, hey, what am I getting into? And so it's another opportunity. If you've got a woodworker close by or a pro woodworker, and, you know, it doesn't hurt to stop by and say, hey, you know, you're looking for some part-time help, or, you know,
Right.
It's a good opportunity to learn skills and the business side of it.
And then ask to see his car and where he lives. Because it might be a bit of an eye-opener. Because it might be the same thing. It's like, here's my car and here's where I live in the car.
Got a nice shop, though.
Yeah, got a nice shop. The guy that taught me to make furniture down in South Carolina always told me, because before I came here, I did think about, I thought about going back to school to like North Bennett Street or College of the Redwoods, but I was like, there's no way I'm spending more money on an education. Although I didn't pay for grad school, but I also thought about turning professional. And he always told me, he said, well, that's fine. You want to do that, but make sure your wife has a good job where she can get overtime and has great benefits, because, you know, it's a hard life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of making money.
Yeah, and we see that, you know, on the road. You know, a lot of our authors have a spouse that often has a full-time job where they have the benefits.
Yeah. But then Tim Brousseau has told me, he said, you know, woodworking is a hard way to make a living, but it's a great way to make a life.
Yeah. And actually, some people are, I think, making a pretty good living in woodworking. And Instagram is a really good way to sort of get a window into how people are going about it. I mean, Philip Morley, we talked about last time around, has a great feed, and you really get a sense he's making a go of it. Greg Pilati, great woodworker. He's a graduate of the Thaddeus Stevens College of where Steve Latta runs that program, and they have a little, I would say, a more trade-oriented approach to the craft. And he got out of school, has his own business, has some employees, really turning out lots and lots of stuff. You really get a sense he's as busy as he wants to be. So you can definitely do it. It's out there. Now, if you say, hey, you know, I have a big heavy bench and some hand tools. I love, you know, working by hand only. How do I turn that into a viable career? Well, that might be a different type of challenge. Start a podcast, you know, write about it.
YouTube channel.
Yes. So, but there's different ways to do it. Teach it, you know.
Yeah, there are many ways to be in our overarching profession of woodworking and make money. You don't have to be a professional furniture maker.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's get to the next question. This one comes from Woody. And Woody says, I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of woodworkers resawing wide boards on a bandsaw where they pinch together the leading end of the board as they complete the cut. Is there a reason for this? Wouldn't pinching it lead to a thinning out of the offcut? I could see how the blade's motion could lead to kick down, like Matt mentioned in a previous episode when making Cullen's bandsaw boxes. But is there such a thing as bandsaw kickback? No kickback.
Yeah, it's kick down. There's no kick back. I mean, I guess I don't see it's absolutely impossible. It's conceivable, I guess. It's possible that in some bizarre situation that somehow the piece of wood would get thrown back at you, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine what it would be. Two, the pinching of people will pinch that board on the back side of the blade to help because they want to pull it through.
Yeah, right.
And it's not going to do anything to the parts that have already been cut because they're already past the cutting teeth. So it's not going to affect the either side of the cut.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're not pinching it right back near the blade.
Right. And as long as, I mean, if the board is far enough through the blade and you do that, it's not really going to affect anything at all. It does not affect the cutting action. It doesn't pinch the blade.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. You just pull it through.
Yeah, you just don't want to pull too hard.
Right. I mean, you still have to maintain a good feed rate as you do that. And it is safe to do on a bandsaw because the cutting action is down.
Yes.
Do not do it on a table saw.
No.
Do not.
Good advice.
Yes.
Do not pinch. So, all right. Anything to add, Mike?
I have nothing. That was
Awesome.
perfect. Perfect answer.
Write that down, please, Ben. Record that. Are we recording this?
I forgot something.
Ben.
No. All right.
When I mentioned cheese and hot dogs, he got distracted.
It's almost lunchtime.
It is.
All right.
I'm hungry.
Our final question comes from Christian. And Christian says, I recently bought some used Lee Nielsen chisels online. The previous owner decided to glue the handles into the sockets with what I think is polyurethane glue, but it might be epoxy. How do I remove the handles without damaging them? Also, how can I tell if the blades are O1 or A2 steel?
Why do you want to remove the handles?
That was my hunch.
Yeah,
That's
what's
why
the big deal?
And if you're taking them out to put new handles on, why do you care if you damage them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's say you do.
Let's first destroy the logic of his question.
So
Here comes the philosopher.
I would try like heating up the socket, maybe with like a little kind of blowtorch kind of a thing, or
Don't
maybe
heat it up too much.
Maybe a
but-
heat gun. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to. You obviously don't want to set the handle on fire or take the temper out, but you all are only heating up the socket, so you're not worried about the
Yeah.
cutting edge of the blade. And I think, for instance, epoxy, I don't think that handles heat really well. So I think the heat would
Yeah,
get that thing out
epoxy
there. I
would,
don't know.
yeah.
The other thing you're doing is you're actually expanding the metal socket. So if anything, you might be pulling that away from the wood.
So yeah, heat it up and then whack the handle on your bench.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And do it.
And that'd probably do it. Knock it loose. Yeah, and then there is
And then
a
make a new
way
handle.
to tell the difference between O1 and A2 steel. Lee Nielsen no longer makes the O1 steel chisels, and what you want to do is take your chisel and hold it in your hands, and then you spin it around. And if it's O1 tool steel, there will be a stamp into it that says O1. And if it's A2 steel, it won't have that.
It'll just be plain.
It'll just be plain.
I
So
was waiting for something really like you wait for the tune.
you wait for the tune.
You flick it.
No, I believe that O1 stamp it's on the socket, but I can't remember if it's on the top or the bottom of the chisel. But that's definitely what they did at the time when they were making them. John Tatro, who works here at the magazine, has some O1 Lee Nielsen chisels, and they have that stamp on them. So
Good to know.
I've been guilty of gluing my chisels, socket chisels, the handles into them.
there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I-
especially if you have a shop where, like in the winter, mine tend to fall out. You know,
Yeah,
so
you go pick up a chisel out of the rack by the handle, and it gets like just up in the air, and then
Yeah.
the chisel falls out onto the
Right.
floor or the bench or something. So.
if you want them to stay in, but don't want them to stay in permanently, from what I understand, hairspray.
Oh, really?
If you spray hairspray in your hair, and then you rub the chisel in your hair. Now you spray it on the handle, then you jam it down in the socket, and that will hold it in place.
Huh, cool.
Yeah.
Tip of the week.
Tip of the week. I read that somewhere on the internet, so it must be true, right?
Everything else is.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we have a special guest on the line today. Today we have Nick Offerman, TV and film actor, woodworker, and now author. And I don't think they're necessarily in that order. Nick is on the phone with us today to talk about woodworking and his new book, Good, Clean Fun. Welcome aboard, Nick. Today we have Mike Pekovich, our art director.
Hey, Nick.
And Matt Kinney's with us as well.
Hey, Nick, how you doing?
So how, I know you wrote a book. We're not hanging up on anybody. Hey, with your busy schedule, how did you find time to write this book, and what inspired you to do it?
Well, it was the busy schedule actually that was the inspiration, because I was really missing time in my shop, having fun performing showbiz on the road, and I said, this clown life is a lot of fun, but I haven't made something substantial for some months, so I came up with the idea of the book so I could tell my agents to leave me alone. And a book qualified as some substantial enough project that they said, okay, we'll call you in 6 months. And so it worked like a charm. I got to not only make some stuff in my shop, but make this book with all the rest of the woodworking
Well, you have some
better
pretty
than I thought.
you have some pretty big names in there. Along with the young folks in your shop, you've got Pete Galbert, Chris Bexford, Laura Mays, Gary Knox Bennett. What made you include those folks in the book? What was the inspiration behind that?
I was writing my introduction to the book, and right off the bat, if you're an intermediate woodworker as myself, who happens to have been on television, quite frequently you get introduced erroneously as a master woodworker. People love to just put that word master in front of it.
Yeah.
And I guess they'd be embarrassed to have a medium woodworker on the tip. I always get really embarrassed, and I always ask them not to say that. So I opened by saying, look, let's just clear the air here. I'm not a master woodworker. I'm a big fan of it, and I'm pretty decent at it, and we're going to have a fun book together. But let me introduce you to some master woodworkers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the idea came from, was here are people who have devoted their lives to it and made amazing strides in the craft. And so, and to give people an idea of the different directions you can take woodworking.
Yeah. And you also, in your shop, you've got a good load of young woodworkers, doing some really, really good work. How did you find those folks? Did they kind of discover you, or, did you find them?
It was pretty organic, really. I found Lee, who runs the shop. She was sent from woodworking heaven. I put the word out that I wanted somebody to help me set up such a collective, and somebody got me together with her, and we just really hit it off. And then we started collecting people, and it happened really organically. And we've lost a couple over the years and gained a couple more. And it's also a good mix of skill. Some of them come fully trained, and some of them are learning as they go.
That's sweet. So
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, actually, Matt Kenny has a question for you. Go ahead, Matt.
Sometimes Tom thinks he's the only person on the podcast. So one thing I'm interested in is that it looks like both. I know your brother is in the book, and then also your dad is in the book. So I knew your brother, whose name is Matt, right?
His name is Matt.
Yes, it's a good
Charismatic.
Yes. But I did not know that your dad is a woodworker. So is that something that you started to do as a kid and learned from him, or is it something that he got into later in life because of you?
Well, he absolutely taught me to use tools. He was an amateur woodworker himself. He grew up on a farm a few miles down the road from the house I grew up in. And so we would build things around the house, and we built a small barn and a garage. And, he was a handy carpenter. But once he had kids, he started messing around with little furniture projects just on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so he taught me to use tools and sort of the basics in a shop. But then when I got into fine woodworking, it was really neat because I could then take all that back to him, and he got really excited, and then he built a much nicer shop onto his garage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a really cool way of us to bond in later life.
Yeah, it's nice.
That's cool.
Very nice.
So how do you find time to woodwork these days? I mean, do you still like it as much, even though it's sort of a kind of a side business?
Well, I kind of like it even more now that it's a little more unattainable.
That sounds familiar.
I have to put my foot down, which actually this book tour is the last job on my schedule. Going forward, I have 0 jobs for the first time in several years, and that's by design. Partly just so my wife and I can live at our house, which is it's become the most exotic of destinations, and also so I can go get into my shop and get back into domestic life a little bit.
Now, is your shop at your house, or is it a few blocks
No,
away?
it's about 30 minutes across town.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So these days, I know you've did an article for us on flattening slabs, and it looks like you guys are doing a lot of live edge work. What's inspiring you these days, and what's inspiring the folks in your shop? What kind of stuff are you diving into?
Well, the shop is sort of, ever since I started, Los Angeles has a great client base because you have a lot of people running into new wealth, but whether it's in show business or music, you get these clients who suddenly have a house that they want to fill with one-of-a-kind items. And so that's a great pool of people to order a nice live edge slab table. And so we do a lot of that, and we've gotten in league with a few designers where we end up kind of doing a whole house full of furniture for people built around that aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done some really interesting kitchen pieces, massive end grain like walnut, butcher's block, kitchen island kind of things. And also a lot of creative, like reclaimed big oak timber shelf units and built-ins and stuff. So the shop always kind of seems to have new and exciting challenges. Right now we're doing a second version of a 7-foot round dining table that we call Zeus's wagon wheel because it has a big lazy Susan in the middle of it. So it seems like we always get very challenging, beefy commissions.
Yeah.
To keep us all on our toes, learning together. And for myself, my inspiration has been I'm working my way slowly towards building my own acoustic guitars.
Oh,
wow.
sweet.
That's something I play and I tour with. And so I'm in the middle of a batch of ukuleles. And it, having a couple different careers, I find really healthy because when I'm on the road every night going to bed, I think about my next step on the bench with the ukuleles, and that occupies my mind fruitfully so that I don't worry too much about the sports scores.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the book. I mean, what you've got some projects in it. You've got some good interviews. You even have some recipes. What what inspired you to kind of put all of this stuff together? Was it just kind of your woodworking life between covers?
Well, having said, opening the book by announcing that I have no business writing a textbook, I set about to make the funnest textbook I could come up with. I'm very self-taught, mostly from fine woodworking, or from the textbooks, of the greats. And while they're incredibly effective and informative, there are parts of it that I understand can be intimidating to people looking to get into the craft. Even if you flip through your fine magazine, if you happen to land on dovetails or something about Lee Nielsen tools, you could say, "Oh, geez, that looks pretty fancy," and be scared off.
Yeah.
And so I sort of back it up and say, look, if you just go out in the yard and hammer a couple boards together, you've begun. Congratulations. And so added to that sort of gentle introduction, my woodworking life is also much more complex than me, in my shop at my bench. It's my community of people, including my dad and my brother, and it's really a way of life. So, I wanted people to feel like it's not just a solitary pursuit, that could break your fingers
Right.
and your checkbook, but actually a really friendly and welcoming sort of community, both in person and in online forums and stuff. And so to do that, I had each of the woodworkers in my life do a project chapter. So you get to meet all these different personalities and skill levels. And then we also have the chapter about a cookout, because that's what we do on the weekends at the shop.
Fun.
My wife even does a shop fashion section.
Yeah, I saw that.
Quite enjoyable and snappy.
That's great. It's something, we're all about spreading the word and trying to kind of emphasize that, it's not just necessarily individuals in the shop. There's a whole sort of collective of like-minded people out there, and we're just trying to have some fun.
Well, yeah, that's what, when I started writing the book, I thought, well, I guess my biggest value to offer to the field is as a cheerleader. And a fan, and so that gave me a point of view that made me very enthusiastic. And the hard part was actually writing as little as I did. You get to a section, start writing about sharpening, and you think, well, gosh, you can write a whole book about that. And a couple of guys did, so here, I'll recommend those books and move on to the table saw.
That's a good approach. Hey, on the podcast, we do a regular, kind of a semi-regular segment called our all-time favorite tools of all time for this week. And it's basically, typically what we're using at the time and what maybe something that got us out of a jam. Do you care to chime in on that topic? What's your all-time favorite tool of all time for this week?
Well, my answer is one that is a good segue to the book, because I've been fascinated with the draw knife, as any woodworker would be once you start to learn what all the old tools are. Mm-hmm. And I was always pretty clumsy with it until I took Peter Galbert's Windsor chair class, and he ran us through working with green wood from writhing, billets of oak, and then throwing them on the shaving horse. And his mastery and love of the draw knife was really like being taught the lightsaber by Yoda. It really, the class was like giggling with delight to watch Peter get on that thing and make it look so simple once he explained the physics of both sharpening and tuning up the tool, and then employing it. And so then, that's what I love about woodworking, is then I can take that to the shop and say, okay, you guys, check this out. And we got a couple nice knives that we keep tuned up. And so that, just recently, because we work with such weird organic shapes and live edge pieces, we now have this tool that we can turn to that, with a few pulls of the draw knife, you can equal the work of half an hour with a spoke shave.
Yeah.
And so the draw knife would be my answer.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks for coming on. Your book is available now, Good, Clean, Fun, and I'm sure it's available on Amazon and other online retailers. I appreciate you getting up early to spend some time with us.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure, especially because fine woodworking is one of the parents of the book. I mean, it's absolutely the wellspring from which a great deal of my knowledge has come and continues to feed me. So,
well, I appreciate that. Thank
your own
you.
damn fault.
All right, Nick. Hey, thanks. Good luck on the road, and good luck with the book. It's a fun read.
Thank you very much, Jen. So
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Nick.
Well, that was great. Really appreciate having Nick on the show. Let's wrap up now with some listener feedback.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Scott writes, I really think I get the best woodworking information from this podcast. I like the humor, the snark, the digressions. It's a good team. Gordy chimes in and says,
Whoa,
fellas.
wait a minute. If this is your best source of woodworking information,
Yeah, you need to get off the internet. You need to read a book. You need to read a magazine.
We're not giving good info.
Yeah.
Gordy says, fellas, I really enjoy Shop Talk Live. And with each episode, I realize how much I have to learn. About the row of cases on the windowsill behind Matt. I have enjoyed seeing the large gray squirrel that frequents the tree just to Matt's left shoulder, but now I'm unable to see the tree or the squirrel. Are the cases really necessary?
Yes.
Yes, they're blocking all the protesters with torches.
Also, we killed the squirrel.
We ate the squirrel.
It was delicious.
He became a hot dog.
Yeah.
that was our bonus.
Our bonus, yeah. You guys have been so good, you get a little squirrel.
Squirrel on a stick. It's not just a squirrel.
It's a squirrel on a stick.
And we made the pellet into a little mouse pad. Anyway, finally, Thomas writes, thanks for the smooth moves. I thought it was just me and Murphy. LOL.
Laughing out loud for those of you who are not familiar with the internet shorthands.
Thanks, Matt. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks on November 11th for our next episode. Remember to send your questions and comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. And please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on the web at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Also, don't forget to visit finewoodworking.com to take part in the tool giveaway for our 40th anniversary. We're down to the last prize, and it's a doozy. A saw-stop cabinet saw worth more than $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To win, you have to enter by October 31st. That's, just around the corner, so get on it. To enter, go to finewoodworking.com/40sweeps. That's the number 40, finewoodworking.com/40sweeps. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop.
Actually, an option for that saw stop prize, it's either that or a vintage 1980s Delta Unisaw.
Yeah.
Take your pick. Let me know.
Speaking of saw stops, did you know that?
Were we?
Yes. 8% of all woodworkers carry a raw hot dog in their pocket at all times.
Where do they keep the bun?